Our scripture reading this morning comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. This comes at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And this is obviously only a portion. I'm reading out of the Message version this morning. These words I speak to you are not incidental additions to your life, homeowner improvements to your standard of living. They are foundational words, words to build a life on. If you work these words into your life, you're like a carpenter who builds their house on solid rock. Rain poured down and the river flooded. A tornado hit, but nothing moved the house. It was fixed to rock. But if you just use my words in Bible studies and don't work them into your life, you're like a carpenter who builds their house on a sandy beach. When a storm rolled in and the waves came up, collapsed like a house of cards. Will you please pray with me? And now may the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Oh my goodness, I forgot how heavy this was. Who remembers this? Does anybody remember this rock? We came together a year ago. A year ago we set this before us, and we read from Joshua 24. It's at the end of the Exodus, and the Israelites have made their journey out of Egypt for 40 years. They've wandered in the wilderness. For 40 years they've lived the ups and the downs of life. For 40 years they've learned, they've messed up, they've gotten better, they've messed up again. For 40 years. And they make it. They get to their place. And when they get to their place, Moses has died, and Joshua leads them in past the Jordan into the land of milk and honey. And he reminds them of their covenant. And he sets their covenant down and buries it under an oak tree and takes a rock, and he puts that rock on top of it, and he says, let that rock bear witness to the covenant you've made. And so a year ago, we came here after a journey that took us many places, that saw us coming together, that saw us falling apart at times, that saw us moving, and then moving, and then moving,
and then not moving.
and then not moving. And wondering when the day would come when we would not move. And a year ago we moved in. And we remembered what we had committed ourselves to do. And we said, let this rock, this exact rock, bear witness to what we've said we would do. Now, if you're a geology nerd, I'm sorry. I'm a little wrong in what I'm getting ready to say. I understand that. Rocks do change, right? But it takes a long time. Like millions of years. It doesn't happen overnight. That's why the rock is so important. Because when Joshua said, let this rock bear witness to what we have covenanted to do, Joshua was saying, let this unmovable, unchanging thing. They didn't know geology. Let this unmoving, unchangeable thing always be what reminds you who you are. So it's back. A year later, it's back to remind us again who we've said we want to be. It's back because in the story this morning, Jesus talks about a rock. And he talks about a rock for the same reasons that Joshua picked up a rock. Because although over time we've all seen it happen, or we've all heard and read about it happening as the waters roar and the wind blows, that they do begin to wear down. And they do begin to change. But not in our lifetimes. Not that we'll actually notice. The Grand Canyon isn't going to be different tomorrow than it was 100 years ago. And this rock will look like this for millions of years. And so Jesus tells a story about what makes your foundation. What is it that represents who we are? And he does it to illustrate what he had just done. Do you remember the Sermon on the Mount? Do you remember how he goes out and people are following him and he begins to preach? And not only does he begin to preach, he begins to say things that make no sense whatsoever. Right? He opens that up with the Beatitudes that are kind of oxymorons. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Really? Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who are hungry and who thirst for righteousness. It doesn't make sense. But that was the point. That was the point of everything that had happened before. He said, I'm turning the world upside down because everything that you see around you, everything that you've experienced that's gotten you this far, I want you to think about it in a new way. And truly, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And then he continues, right? And he takes the Ten Commandments and he kind of turns them upside down a little bit. And he says things that we're not sure we want to hear. One that's more pertinent today than it has been in a while, about adultery. And he says, even looking at someone is wrong in that way. He gives us a new standard. He begins the end of that by saying, what's the golden rule? What have we all heard? It's even marked as the golden rule in my Bible. Do unto others as you will have done to you. Crazy things. Things that have become so much a part of who we are as people who may come to church every day, as people who may not. We've heard it. Things that don't seem as crazy as they once did until we really begin to dissect them and to look at them. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Oh my goodness. What have I done? What have we done that we don't want done to us? Because we say it and we hold it up. How many times do we turn our backs to those we see in need? And not just the person on the side of the street, right? But the people who are being abused by words, by actions. We say this really isn't my responsibility. It really isn't my place. And I wonder how often, if we were in the same place, we'd just be begging for someone to please lift me up. Please recognize me. How many times do we overlook? And then when he's finished, after he tells us these words that I've said, that's your rock. That's your rock. He goes on and explains it for the next 10 chapters. Telling us all the ways that he goes out of his way. That he reaches out to those that nobody else wants to reach out to. That he touches those who have been forgotten by society. That he invites them in. The ones who no one else wants to come in. He tells stories about outsiders. Not just the person who's a little different, but the person that you hate the most. He says that's the person who loves you the most. That's the person who's your neighbor. He gives us these examples that just don't make sense. And then he says, now go and do it. And this rock serves as witness to the fact that that's what we've said we are. That's who we've said we want to be. People who open our doors, who who open our hearts, who open our lives to those who may have never had someone open themselves to them before. And don't be mistaken, they're all over the place. They're not just the person you see on the corner with the sign. They're the people you work with, the people you love, the people that are hurting so much. Right? The things that we feel, the things that we experience, the things that we do. I don't think what's happening in politics right now, I don't think that it's outside of the realm of where we all live from time to time. Probably more than time to time, we just don't want to admit it. And we get into these places where we are singularly focused not on building, not on living, not on helping others, but we're focused on destruction and tearing down and our own self-worth. What Jesus did after the Sermon on the Mount was went out and lived a life of compassion and mercy and love. Not asking of others, but always giving, always moving, always doing. And that's the rock that we've built ourselves on. That's who we want to be. And so today, we come together. A year after we moved in, we come together to dedicate this place. We come together, recognizing that this is who we've said that we're going to be, and it's no different than it was a year ago. It was just as heavy then as it is now. And it reminds us, that's why we're in this place. Not just so we don't have to move again next week, not just so that we have our own place that we can retreat into, but so that we have our own place where we can throw open the doors and make it the place of others. And make it the place where everyone is welcome. And so may the foundation upon which this community is built be a community of faith that stands the test of time. May this building serve as a gathering place, not just for those of us who come on Sunday mornings, but for all who seek refuge from the world around us. For everyone who's been caught outside and not invited, may we be that place. May this be the place where we gather to be made whole, to confess what needs to be confessed, to forgive what needs to be forgiven, and then to take that into the world around us. May this be the place where we gather to love one another so that we have enough to take it into the world around us. Make no mistake, this is a special day. Because this is the day that we dedicate this place to our covenant with God. Amen.